Star Tribune this year before Herzl, who shepherded me through 59 book reviews. One of that, of the 8 or 10 people who really influenced me as a writer of stories and reviews, and she was one. Because there were times when you feel a little blue pat and Mr. Johnson, and then you have a delightful person come into your life and ask you to do things for her. And one time she gave me 3 big novels to read over the summer, and she wrote, "This will keep you busy." What a delight, holy cow. And now I have another delight in my life, in Miss Dunbar. I was so stupid as to go to the first reading promoting this book. It was at Zenith in Duluth, and I said, Carol was there, and I said, I'd like to read 10 pages. And right away I thought, oh boy, I think I've maybe overdone it. So I wised up in the next reading we had together. I said, I'd like to read 6 pages. I finally have gotten it through my head that that's too much. 3 pages. It is from,
You did do Elvis moves.
well, I did. I got to channel the king, so that was good. Then Elaine, my wife, said, don't do it. I tried it all at home, the hip move, and she said, don't do it, but I just couldn't resist, and so. Well, this is 3 pages. It's from The Thief of Words, which is it's a title story. My dad worked at a flour mill. I wear his wristwatch here. When he retired from the mill in ill health, he got this watch. And one day, an owl had gotten into the engine room at the flour mill. This is a dangerous place, which is why metal railings surround the machines and the main conveyor belt. Mice and rats have been crushed by the belt. Cats have died there. Hank Gehring and the guys thought the owl had flown in through a front door that had been left open. Things get in, our father said at supper, but I hate when it's an owl. We've been taping around the windows in other places. We have to seal the mill to make it tight, then we'll shut down for fumigation. After informing us of this, he didn't talk much. He went to his basement workbench to sit. Maybe he whispered to himself down there. Barbara, my sister, said she hoped someday to see a snowy owl. After that, she said only a few words, instead drawing in the sketch pad Ma had given her as I read a book about birds. The book must have had 300 color portraits. Plates 43 through 45 showed 13 kinds of North American owls. This is where I learned snowy owls breed, quote, on the barren grounds and islands of the far north. That, quote, many individuals wander south in the winter to milder climates, unquote, and that, quote, heavy migrations of snowy owls are called eruptions and snowy owl years. When my classmates went home for lunch, I walked to the bay to look for the owl. The mill stood on a long pier. Grain cars lined the tracks. Unless my father went into the office for something first, he entered the mill through the tall gray engine room doors. The place had a vaulted ceiling, arched windows. Machinery pounded, belts spun. A man lift carried workers to the upper floors and back. The mill's sanitarian had taped up his signs, danger, methyl bromide in use, and set out his poison. The engine room would be still, except for the owl in the shadows. When methyl bromide reacts with moisture in the air or grain, a colorless, odorless gas forms. The gas causes the lungs of rodents to swell as they struggle to breathe. My father saw a squirrel die in a grain bin after one mill shut down. Now an owl was in there, and the mill would close for the poisoning. Joe Bluebird, another employee, yelled at the owl to frighten it. My dad steadied a ladder for Mr. Gehring. Over the noise of the machines, he said, "Get the long pole from the loading dock." High on the ledge, white against the gray bricks, the owl perched. Even with the pole, they couldn't reach it. "It's too bad. It's just too bad," Mr. Gehring said. When my dad saw me, he asked, "Why aren't you home for lunch?" Tamasha. Hoping to impress him, I pointed to the owl and said, "Biawi." white in Polish. Come, said my father. With the boiler room doors closed against the sounds of the engine room, we sat beside the coal pile, where he gave me the sandwich from his lunchbox. You'll go hungry, I said. Tell your mother to serve your supper as usual. We have to finish here. We shut down after this. Bring a candy bar home for your sister later. He gave me a nickel for the vending machine. On the walk to school, I turned to look for the owl. I know how to say white, I told Sister Venetia when I got back. But white in Polish are the words for whiteness and snow. When my father came in later, he didn't want to be bothered in either language. Then the watchman from the mill called. With methyl bromide poisoning everything, the watchman, Joe Bluebird, working overtime, wanted to know if he could go back inside to try once more to rescue the owl. It's too late, my dad said. And he said something I couldn't hear. Too late for what? With the phone call over, he said, if it snows, shovel the sidewalk tomorrow, Tomasz. Later, my mother saw the light in Barbara, my sister's room. She and I were looking at the map of Poland. Maybe the owl has come from there, I said. A lot of names start with white in Polish. Biała Panienska is white maiden. Białobrzegi is white shore. Barbara read more about boreal owls. Their love song has a curious liquid note, like ting, 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 many times repeated. Another owl, neither a boreal owl nor a snowy owl, makes a screeching coo-wee sound followed by a kind of whistling sound. With our father at his basement workbench and the heat registers in the room shut, my sister and I talked freely. As if such a thing is possible, we were inventing a language of owls. And that's the story of the owl that got caught in the flower. The things you learn when you grow up. The owl, the flour mill, taping up for fumigation. I can't remember all the other things that I was going to mention here about this, but these terrible things when you have to go to work in a place like that, no less. Let alone have to tape it up and be involved in such a thing as this. But yeah. So thank you for coming. It's good to see you all. That's one of the gentler stories, I guess, in the book. Do you think the owl lives? No, sir? No, I think it does. That does, because the boy in the story meets his father coming home from night in the fog, coming home from the night shift at the flour mill, and they hear something overhead, and no one else in the neighborhood, and he names the names, and so the neighbors will probably hear it the way they hear it. And then later on in the story, the father dies from working in the flour mill and in other hazardous places. And so later, the boy comes back, 20 years later, to walk down there and think of his father on a foggy night when the creek is running high. And then the last line he says, Father, Father, in two languages, they being Polish and English. So, right. And now here's Ms. Dunbar.
That was my favorite story. I love the owl and what you did with the relationship between the father and the son. And I want to thank you all for being here tonight, for coming out. This book of short stories it's a marvel. Every single one of them will take you through the gamut of laughing and crying and heartbreak and poignancy. Anthony writes where I live in Superior, Wisconsin. That's my town now. And reading his stories kind of taught me how to understand the people that I live with, the way they have a different way of going about their day. And when I started doing research for A Winter's Rhyme, I started looking at the effects of trauma on somebody. And these are stories about displaced people, traumas they inherit and the weights that they carry that they might not even be aware of. And so one of the things I became aware of was that we had this French restaurant in Superior that opened with a real French chef. Amazing food. And he went out of business. And I have a theory. It was because the people of Superior didn't think they deserved a French chef.
I agree. What do we need a French restaurant? I ate there. When we had job interviews, we had candidates on campus to interview for English positions, teaching positions in English. You got it.
Yeah. It's very difficult to change your mind about what you think you deserve. And that's, I think, what you read about, that's the shared feel of life.
Carol calls Superior Spurly. I'll ask her about that. She's told me before why she named it Superior and not be bold like Tony and call it Superior. But she has very good reason that I didn't know.
Well, you have the authority. Born and raised there. I am a newcomer to the area. I'm not from the Midwest even. So I was given advice by Leif Enger that if I'm going to write about a town that's smaller than a certain, because I named Duluth in my novels. The population of Duluth is 86,000. The population of Superior is only 26 something. And he told me that I better make up a name or everybody's going to write me emails and call me up and tell me all the things I got wrong. So I called the town Sterling to fiction.
I said Spurly. He was somebody I know went to Spurly and Barbara Spurly, but it's Sterling.
Sterling.
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never knew that. It makes sense to not call it by its real name or people are going to find fault in it. I didn't have the strength to do that. I had a small book out in 1986 called 12 Below Zero, and I called Superior Too Hard. Too Hard, not a bad name. I mean, maybe reflective of Hemingway's Speak to the River, I don't know. But I called it Too Hard, and it seemed as a metaphor it was all right. But then I thought, wait a minute, why don't I just call it Superior? Maybe
You can get away with it though. I mean,
Well.
you have such intimacy with this place and its people.
I sure do.
Yeah.
Carol writes even about the Anchor. Lori Herzl knows the Anchor Bar in Superior, Wisconsin. I shouldn't say Anchor Bar, I should say the Anchor Cafe. She knows it. I know it. We were in there last week, and I was happy to see you mention it. You don't mention it as the Anchor. Yeah, I don't remember.
No, I just
But
describe it.
Sure, and Dean was the director of the place.
Yeah. And then there's, I had a lot of fun writing about Dan Sweetman. If we can't feed it, you don't need it. That's the motto.
Well, I use that in this book of stories, collection of manuscript of stories I'm writing now, because we had Banner Hardware in Superior. It had everything, and I couldn't remember what the motto said on the side of the store, but I think it was if we don't have people, I think that was at Banner Hardware too. So, well, welcome to Superior.
Well, we had thought we might talk about weather in kind of to focus our conversation a little bit. I was looking at English 101, the story of ice and snow in this book about an English teacher, an adjunct professor, who is pursued by Mrs. Kobayashi.
Kobayashi.
And then so when the heater comes on and the drapes move, she becomes very frightened. And then another phenomenon happens with this mist on the window glass. Miss Kobayashi is right. Someone's come. A shape appears 3/4 of the way up the glass door that leads to the deck and back. When I start the space heater, the shape evaporates. Perhaps inside, a draft keeps this part of the door colder, the part 6 or 7 inches across at its widest 2 feet high. Something wants to frighten us. So they're convinced that somebody is watching the house, even though there's a swirling snowstorm outside. And then later, before sunset, the condensation returns. The watcher. Check if the lock's frozen on the patio door. She steps out. Watching each other through the screen door and the glass door, we explore the poetics of space. I can't understand how the condensation appears when Nell and I have never seen it. Nell is his wife. Nothing has ever occurred like this in our house. Miss Kobayashi says it's psychological. I say it's phenomenological.
Does anyone know what phenomenology is? Can you help me? I wrote the story, but I never fully grasped it. I wrote a doctoral dissertation at Iowa on phenomena. Gaston Bachelard wrote a book called The Poetics of Space. Ifu Tuan, who taught in Minnesota and at Wisconsin, wrote a book called Space and Place, The Perspective of Experience. And I'm intrigued by space and what they mean, what cellars mean, what attics can mean, according to Bachelard and others. And this is a phenomenon, I guess, something unstated that we sense. And this phenomenon occurs at the house with inside and outside space, because the adjunct professor making $6,000 while his wife works at a full-time job, he's got time to be like Borfomov in The Cherry Orchard, who is the eternal student. He just has time to read books like the Phenomenology of Space, The Poetics of Space, and to draw on these things. And he meets this Japanese student, and she starts stalking him. And so when his wife has gone to Arizona, the adjunct teacher, he invites the Japanese woman in, and she stays with him. And eventually, they experience the poetics of inside and outside space. And the phenomenon of what can happen in different, meaning can come from maybe unspoken things. Meaning can arise. And he first locks her out, and then when he goes outside into the snowstorm, she locks him out. And it's a very odd story. And then the professor, decides that when my wife comes back, perhaps she'll leave me. She'll be disappointed in something and leave. And he looks into the future, and he sees himself with Miss Kobayashi, the Japanese student. May I read the last line? What a way to end up romance. In the years to come, Dean Lund, the dean at the college, University of Wisconsin Superior, will have retired in a few years, and Nell, my wife, what will happen to Nell during this time? The biggest mystery will be winter, and how Miss Kobayashi locks me out whenever she feels like it. When she does, she looks from the basement and upstairs windows, and from the patio door window, just stares at me, signaling to please let me in. And what is there for either of us now but an old woman, Miss Kobayashi, looking out at an old man, Professor Yanovsky. You know, the paradise that they imagine becomes the two of them getting old, and they get what they want. Gee, I don't know, don't ask me where, I'll tell you where it came from. We are baffled, my wife and I, in the wintertime, when we get this apparition. Well, it's not an apparition, it appears. It appears on the patio door. What do we call it? The ghost. Yeah, I say to you, the ghost is here on really cold days. I don't know why it appears. No other window gets it, but it gets this ghost figure as though somebody is observing us. And so, I'm glad you noticed that. Wisconsin Public Radio is going to read these stories on chapter a day, some of these stories, and that's one of them.
I love the way you describe Miss Kobayashi as being the winter loneliness of middle age.
No, I never was sure that was so good, but I think it's just it's not so bad. Because his wife coming home from Phoenix in a limousine from the Duluth airport sees this woman struggling in the winter night. And, it's a harrowing stuff. Harrowing, and I call it, I have the guy, the minor teacher, I have him say he's writing a Kaden, and that's a Japanese ghost story. Yeah, I don't know if I pronounced it right, and perhaps it's not even a Kaden, but I call it. So that's what he was writing, where a person has been abused, in this case Miss Kobayashi, comes back to haunt the abuser. So, I don't know, I wasn't sure how it was, but, well, thank you. That is a winter story. And you know that subtitle, the literature of the snow and ice, I taught at UW Superior for a long time, and I always hoped to teach a course of the literature of snow and ice. And I had assembled a number of fictions.
Like the ones you mentioned?
Yeah, like such as the ones I mentioned. What's the Edith Ward? Edith Ward. Can you name a fiction set in winter? Ethan Frome.
I thought of Snow Falling on Cedars.
Yeah, but yes, I hadn't thought of that. Hemingway's Cross Country Snow.
The Tobias Wolff one, where Tobias Wolff story where he's driving in the snow. I can't think of the name.
Oh yeah, the Cross Country Snow. By Hemingway?
No, there's one by Tobias Wolff.
Oh yes,
Driving in,
yes.
yes.
I was going to look that up. I know it. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I thought of that, and I was going to look it up, but then I had a couple. Jack wanted us to go fight it. Who's the great Russian? Solzhenitsyn. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And there was another one. I used another great Tolstoy story, Master of Man. Some of these ended in death by snow. So, yeah, he was going to teach this course, and then he lives the course.
But you never got to teach the course?
No, I could have, because I was free to teach what I wanted, but no, I didn't get around to it. But I had some good Zona Gale, Wisconsin, and a winter story. There's so many others. No, I didn't.
Winter stories are nice in the summer when you're
Well,
high.
Miss Dunbar has had the strength. It is heart and kindness rescue her characters, some of her characters, because in a difficult situation, it informs a Winter's Rhyme, Carol's second book. My mind is healthy, but I was at a reading yesterday. Something about a winter's rhyme. Oh yeah, she sets the whole book in the winter, the entire novel in the depth of winter, in the depth of characters' despair. So I told her this the first time we met, how I admired her for doing that. Do you think it was a risk?
It was born out of necessity. I wrote this novel to figure out what happened to me when I was in my 20s. I went through this winter of the soul period, and I alienated a lot of people who were kind to me, a lot of friends. I was very angry, and I didn't understand what that was all about, and I felt really bad about it, and I wanted to really understand that period in my life. So I started researching for this story. I got the idea for the plot, and I knew that this story would be the perfect vehicle for me to research. What are the effects on a young child process writing this book, and everything I learned along the way, I put right into Mallory, who's my main character. So the book kind of is raw and a little rough because it's very emotionally textured, because I was kind of going through the discoveries as I was writing them. And you said something in an email, Anthony, about how a book's shortcomings improve it. Can you tell me the good news?
Yeah, well, I want to tell Carol that I didn't mean her book because I found no shortcomings. But I think we might have been talking about a collection of stories that are all called The Blondes of Wisconsin. It's a boxing book. I wanted to write a boxing book. I did. I wanted to write a Southern book. I did, because some of these stories are set in Louisiana, where I used to live, and also a testament to Tennessee Williams. But I always felt that the first 4 or 5 stories in The Blondes of Wisconsin might not have been as, you probably weren't the best choices. I think maybe they're okay on their own. There's a story about Marine Corps boot camp. I was in the Marine Corps. A story about a Polish soldiers charging German tanks. But I didn't think the story really settled. The book settles in the 6th story of The Blondes of Wisconsin, when the love story begins, and the demise of the boxer, the boxer's dementia, when that starts to kick in. Then I think the book gets good. And I don't talk like this, but I read the book 2 years after again when we published it, and I thought, this is not bad. So there, I think that the stories that begin the book, I don't think they were for all beautiful. I don't think they were that good, but I think they may have set off the stories that were to come. Perhaps that was storybooks were. W.P. Kinsella, you remember him from writing Shoeless Joe, which became Field and Dreams. He was a good friend of ours, and I'm not basking in reflected glory. He was our friend, my wife's friend and my friend, before he was famous. We had adjoining offices at the UW at the University of Iowa. And Bill and I became fast friends. He came north many, many times. Before, during, and after Field of Dreams. And he said to me once, but he was a big writer, he said to me, Dad, once, all you have to do is have a good first story and a good last story. And he left it at that. Would Dad were so, whatever guy like, I tried that. So I got lucky with The Blondes of Wisconsin. And, whereas I don't think the first stories were all that good, I thought the rest of the story might be better because of it. Do you think, Lori, there's truth in that?
What I want to know is how you decide what order the stories are going to be.
I don't know if I'm the best person to do that.
But that's what you've done, right?
Yeah.
Collection after story.
Well, I think I might have erred in The Blondes, in writing those first stories. I think I might have. I don't know if to individual readers, perhaps they were okay, but I don't know, as a whole, they would appeal to me. But nonetheless, the book is okay. In this one, I decided to start it with a 50-page story about a guy, a young man, and he meets an older woman who gradually turns into Blanchard Law. Who's Blanchard Law, Mr. Johnson?
Sweet Carney Desire.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I love Tennessee Williams. I love beyond anybody maybe Tennessee Williams. And I finally, Bill Kinsella, come to see us down in Louisiana, came to see us in Louisiana. And I told him, look, Bill, I'm thinking about a story about a woman who thinks she's Blanchard Law. And the one line is she was known all up and down the river road, because the river road goes from Baton Rouge and it winds around through the old plantations. And that's what I did. And so, I wrote that long story, and that was the most, I think, maybe one of the stronger, Miss Herzl. I think it might be one of the stronger stories in the book. Lori Herzl said, Tony, I liked it. It's like a fever dream. You're right. And I take that as a compliment. When we were living in Louisiana, and I had this first book called Some of the Stories of Louisiana, and the secretary, whom we liked, she said, Tony, these stories make me feel greasy. And I said, that's the ultimate compliment. I loved it. Oh, she liked the stories, but they were so unusual. She said they made her feel greasy. No one will label you with that.
his face pecked by chickens.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess I'm a sucker for happy endings.
Yeah.
I really felt so much for that kid and this weird little family that him and Mr. Slinker and the woman who thinks she's Blanche Dubois, because why be in the real world when you can make up stories and never pretend one? And the way the three of them come together in this boxcar and take care of each other is so incredibly moving. And then you're just rooting for every single one of them, even though they're making ridiculous choices.
Yeah. Who's writing here? Who's writing? Carol's writing, I'm writing, my niece Elizabeth is, Miss Hertz is writing, you, Mr. Johnson, are writing, and you, are you writing this? Are you good for you? You know that thing about the, I know you're Steve, I reviewed your book.
Yes.
Oh, man, what a delight.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Oh, gee, what a book. Anyway, this thing about the guy getting pecked, I heard it from a friend. This is the poor young man in the Blanche Dubois story. There's Blanche, and then there's Earl Slinker, the guy who thinks he's the king, and then there's this poor boy who tags along with him on the trip down to Louisiana. And this boy, before he runs away from home, would get some kind of sexual satisfaction in running through the chicken coop and being pecked. I don't know about this firsthand, but I heard about it from somebody laying it on me. And that's how he appears as poor kid.
He doesn't have a happy home life.
No.
And I think it's
Listen, you know what? You know what Miss Dunbar has? She has, as I say, the goodness of heart to understand and believe her characters, know that they have flaws, but that they can be resurrected and sanctified, as it were. This happens in her books, and it happens in some of my stories because the story about Blanche Dubois ends when the boy calls home from New Orleans. Blanche is gone out of her mind now, and Tennessee Williams has met her in the French Quarter and taken her to Key West. The boy has gone away to the leper colony in Carville, Louisiana, and that leaves Earl Slinker alone in New Orleans, and finally lonely, he calls his father, and they say they all fall. So you see, it ends in that way. You asked about the cold and the despair in the literature of Snow and Ice and these other stories. I have a cosmology that begins with the deity, in my case, with the deity, and comes through and settles in Superior. And the people of Superior are outcast. The weather is terrible. The things bloom late in the year, and then they die quickly. The topography is strange. It's just an odd, isolated. You shake your head in approval.
Yeah, I think
Oh, well, Duluth.
well,
Okay, you're right. All right. I have this cosmology, and I have formulated this over these years, and I see this as we are outcast. The weather makes us outcast. The landscape, hard up against that brutal lake, with the highlands around us from which we can't escape, this makes us sinners in the hands of the angry God. We suffer because of this. The late blooming things, the lilacs come and go quickly, the peonies follow, they go. I see as a symbol of the broken heart and the sinful heart, the Canadian thistle, which is plentiful out there, beautiful, but also dangerous. And we see wild roses all over the place. And I see those, I image those as the heart of Christ. Because if you look at a wild rose blooming, there are images of Christ in the blooming heart, in the heart of Christ. So this is a cosmology I have. And so winter seems to fit it perfectly well. We're sinners. No, Carol has graciously placed 4 seasons in 5 seasons in 4 seasons, but she returns summer, winter. So she doesn't concentrate the second book. Not that I would have minded, but she has summer and spring and fall and fall. So
Yeah, weather plays a big part in my writing, I think, because I'm so aware of it all the time because of how I live. We heat wood exclusively, and my office and our home is powered by solar, and it's actually quite a lot of work clearing solar panels from snow. to dig a trench underneath the panel so that the snow has somewhere to go when you're scraping it off. And it's a job, especially because we get snow almost every day.
You don't use, I just thought of it, I don't think you use weather well, at least not in the second book, A Winter's Own. I don't know if you use it metaphorically.
I like to use weather the way that I like to write in close third. So I find weather to be really a way to illuminate what's going on in the interior of the person's heart. The way that you perceive things and think of them in your head has a lot to do with your state of mind. And so weather can be a lot of fun to describe from a character's point of view. You can learn a lot about their mental state. So I have a scene in Net Beneath Us when my main character, who's grieving, she lost her husband, and she's trying to cut up wood that fell across her driveway, and she's just so angry about the bugs and the heat and the sweat, and it's buggy and muggy, and there's a lot you can do with that, a lot of sticky
You sure can.
emotions there.
You do well, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the scene. Here's something reminiscent of Steve Fox. Steve Fox is here in the back. He wrote a book called Sometimes Creep, and I reviewed it for the Wisconsin Academy Review. Carol, there's some great, the stories are in New Richmond or Hudson?
Hudson.
Hudson.
Vaguely western Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Hudson
Yeah.
River Falls.
But here's something you can use from a Carol Dunbar novel. She has a child get a tick in his throat. Tick, I've never heard of that.
Well,
A wood tick.
yeah, almost eats wood.
Yeah.
When they get fat and they're the size of a raisin. Yeah.
Oh.
Some things you draw from life and you write about because they're so horrible you don't know it's a house to process.
Not to mention the torch full of garbage. Or should I say garbage?
Yeah, when you live off the grid, there's no garbage truck that comes to your house and takes your garbage away. And they were willing to pick it up where the power lines ended. So we were supposed to drive our garbage up there, but we never remembered to drive our garbage up there on the right day. So finally we figured out where the dump was, and we're like, we're just gonna bring our garbage to the dump. But I never got that right. There were more than one occasion where I had my two kids strapped in their car seats, car full of garbage. I drove 45 minutes into town, get to the dump, and it's closed. Then I have to drive my garbage back home. So it was kind of a preoccupation of mine.
And then an angry dog comes,
Yeah.
and you can't shoot it off.
Yeah.
No, Steve, I mentioned you because of the tick in the throat thing, because things are always burrowing away in your story collection sometimes.
Mhm.
They're burrowing the town right from under us, the limestone right from under us.
Mhm.
The mice and I don't know what else. Oh, what do you call those things? Caterpillars that are both
Centipedes.
they're natural and nice, but they're also lewd. The way you describe them. It's a wonderful, strange book that has gotten some attention.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Carol about borrowing the wood tick.
The wood, yeah. Well, you didn't do this. I wrote you about that. I thought I invented the term garbage trees because here's something nice to fit into my cosmology. The only city I was ever in where you see trash bags in the trees, like penance of despair. And we have them in Superior. And I'm preparing to review Mr. Fox's book, and I see suddenly the garbage trees. I said, wait a minute, I think I wrote about that in Children of Strangers 15 or 20 years ago. But, well, anyway, do you have questions?
I
Or
have a question.
compliments, or comments, thoughts.
So do your stories come to you all in one shot, like the whole thing end to end, or do you make it up as you go?
I'm sorry, what's the?
Do your stories, do they come to you as fully complete in your head?
Oh, heavens no, I
Stuck,
started.
or do you have no idea what's going to happen?
Oh, man, I don't know, I'm not very smart, honestly. I'm happy to admit that, it doesn't hurt me a bit, just as long as I write and makes good fiction, I don't care if I'm smart or not. But I'm not that smart, but I sure do work hard. And no, they don't, I think maybe 4 times in life that a story seemed to come ready made.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a difficult process for me. Bill Kinsella, who wrote Field of Dreams, he could dash a story or novel off without revision.
Mhm.
I thought, how is this possible? But it's tough. See, all work for you.
I make it up as I go. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, but they don't come ready made to you. You just sit down and just,
Usually they're random ideas that I kind of pull together to make one
Yeah.
thing,
yeah.
and then I build a story around it. Often it's a snippet from real life, like Carol's wood tick, and then it kind of grows like a tick around its origin.
Do we need to go there again?
No.
I probably is.
They're raisins.
But I think you have these wonderfully bizarre. Don't say, oh please, because a mouse talks to one of Steve's characters under the earth. Have I got that right?
In the basement.
In the basement.
In the basement, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
big
Ordinarily I think, come on, but you made it work and it was just absolutely beautiful, I thought. And you have the good sense to make some of these stories really touching. Just absolutely touching, despite the odd nature of them. The one where the one child she doesn't vocalize words, she doesn't speak, and then her neighbor becomes things like that. Just one of the beautiful stories in the book, and Carol too. We have the good sense, I think, to show that there is some kind of humanity, goodness in us. We strive our characters for that. So that yes.
I'm curious, did you purposely make the different characters in the People Boys connect together? One of the things my sister and I were reading it and talking about, okay, how are they connected? So she did notes for us for how all of your characters were kind of connected between the stories. And I'm wondering, what's the importance of that, either in the story or to help the reader kind of stay engaged to the next? We want to read the next story because we want to know which character is going to come up and how they're going to be connected. Is that part of your process?
I think that's a good, of course, a good question, but it's a question that has been suggested to me recently too from others, and I think, well, I'm declaring the obvious, but when we repeat places and names of places and characters, it does in a way offer an organizing way to write it as a fiction. We can organize for the reader in one way by renaming characters, because then the reader has to go back and remember consciously or subconsciously what he or she once knew. That's a nicely put, and I'm surprised they haven't heard that a couple times now. Because I know where it was. I had a radio interview with the Madison radio station. Steve has been there too. And the man asked me a question. The interviewer asked me that question. And that's right. I said, yeah, it's an organizing principle. I didn't consciously think of that way, but it's just an organizing principle. Well, one learns from reading and one learns from writing.
I love that you guys are mapping that out. That
Well,
makes me
yeah.
so happy.
Please
We were midway through and we're getting lost. Like, how is this related to this? And so she did a nice job
Well, I
of
tell you
rereading and writing.
in the Belonzo, Wisconsin, you don't get lost after the 5th story, because there are 2 lovers. The fighter who's suffering from Boxer's dementia, and the cook, the second cook on the spin meal sticks. And they appear, I think the rest of the story. You don't get lost there. But it's okay to be lost. It can be lost in a good way. One can be lost in a good way.
You guys are all squinting in the sun. Thank
Yeah,
you
I'm
for
saying.
clarification. Yeah, you're all in the spotlight.
Mr. Johnson, you're writing what?
Right now,
Yes, sir.
I hesitate to describe it because it's very early stage, but I'll say it's present day compared to my first book, and and it's about a corrupt social media influencer.
A corrupt social media
Influencer.
or influencer.
The manner of Elmer Gantry.
Huh?
Like Elmer Gantry.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I was reading that when I was in Vietnam.
What are you working on, Anthony?
Oh, well, a book of stories.
Number 10? What would
No,
be?
I think it's, let's see. I think it's 8 or 9. Well, I've been lucky. Yeah, I am. I'm working hard on this. I'm nearing 80, but I don't intend to quit. I see no reason to quit. You've got a long time ahead of you, Steve, and you see the others who are doing it. And I tell people, well, gee, look at how tall he is. He's doing it, and so too can you. If you just are patient, I tell my niece, and keep working, breaks will come to you. I'm working on a book of stories. I like it. I don't say that, but I do like it. I do like it. But, you know,
The characters, like, as a writer, you have to know everything about your characters in order to give them words and thoughts, right?
I guess.
And so that's just coming to you?
I guess so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know. I do know that I think I came up with a good title, a good man's name. A man's name in that book of Lonzo, Wisconsin, and I got to use it in this book. I like the title, the guy's name, Earl Slinker. Because it suggests something, you know? He kind of slinks in his. I liked it. I liked it. So that also gave me hope, you know, in terms of organizing the book. Yeah, I had a guy named Earl Slinker. It was in one book and now it followed into the second book. But I don't know how much I know about these characters, but I think I know a lot about them because they're so, if not consciously, then subconsciously. I surely know about my dad and my sister. So,
How about you, Carol?
I feel like I really like the way Stephen King puts it, where he said that writing a novel is like excavating a dig site where there's like bones everywhere and you're trying to put them together in the right order, but they're already there. So it's this process of finding out what's there. And I love writing character driven. I don't decide what's gonna happen. I don't write out the outline or plots or anything. I get to know the people and then I put them in scenes together and I see what they say and what they do. And the novel I'm working on now is about 2 artists who collaborate on an art project, and I can't get them to collaborate. And I'm like, you guys, this is the premise. And it's really fun because that's very true. Like, our people who are creative have huge egos. There's a lot to work out and work around.
this is a good response. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, your question about knowing characters, my niece Elizabeth is working on a nonfiction manuscript. A different thing altogether. And so too is Miss Herzl. Her book will be coming out from the University of Minnesota. Her next book will be coming out from the University of Minnesota Press. She's writing on this nonfiction. So that's different. You know, they know everything, but there again, they know it. And then how to shape it and form it.
We learned as actors that there's 3 ways to get to know your character. What they say, what other people say about them, and what they don't say. And I use that all the time. And Michael Booth, who is an actor, who's sitting right here in the front row, we used to have a short story writing group like 20-some years ago, and we would give each other assignments and write stories. And I remember you had a character who every morning he made oatmeal, and he didn't measure the oatmeal. He just poured it into where the dent was in the pan. And that detail just jumped out as so awesome because you just automatically know.
this.
Work seems to play a big role in both of your work, what jobs that people have. So I wanted to inquire about how you think about your character's work and how it influences.
May I say one thing? I never thought of one sentence. I had never thought of this before. One of the outside evaluators of this book, the press has 2 outside evaluators, and he wrote and said partly what he found interesting about Bukoski's work was the jobs. I never thought of that. I mean, I just used jobs in fiction. But that, yeah, it's Carol. I can't get out of it every time I go into quick trip. The stores up north, because she write the whole second book of hers. Much of it is in the quick trip.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't think about using jobs, they just appeared. My dad was a laborer.
I think it's a positive, I see it as a positive trend that's happening now in literature. It used to be just for the elite and people who didn't have to work, so they could just write books. They were independently wealthy and they could write. And that's changed now. People are writing their stories and real people who have jobs. I found that some of my best readers are nurses. They really get like the situations that these people are in because that's what they go through. And I read to expand, my empathy, and I feel like when we can see somebody's job and what they do, we walk away with a whole brand new understanding.
Is it Noah?
No,
Yeah. I keep thinking of Boy Isaac, that oracle,
yeah.
who is just as you described him, although, not you don't describe him, but he is the type that you describe perfectly, because the type you describe in your book, Winter's Rhyme, is the type I see in Noah.
I had to call it, I couldn't call it Quick Trip, my publisher flagged that, and I'm gonna get sued, so it's called the speed stuff, but we all know it's.
But you're right, about the jobs, because I didn't know that the workers had to do all these things, and that they could talk over their, whatever those headsets and all this other stuff. I had no idea.
I thought it was interesting too, the things they deal with in the middle of the night, during the night shift, the riffraff, the kind of people that come in, and their relationships with the truckers are really close, and it's like a whole culture, it's so interesting, it's really fun.
And that offers some reprieve from the difficulties that bedevil Carol's principal characters going into the quick trip. Not that things that are joyous there, because they have problems too. Noah gets angry at her, they have problems, but it does offer a respite from the outside world, because I guess now you're in a confined space. You're in a regulated and confined space, as opposed to the irregularity and chaos of the outside world, and there's plenty of it in the dark and in the winter. So, John, that's a good, I like that idea, my child.
Yeah. When I was an actor, there was this book called, it was by Studs Terkel, and it was called Working. And he just interviewed a bunch of people, and it was a great resource to get monologues from, because people just talked about what their job was. And I always thought that was really cool that they did that.
Maybe you covered this already because I got here late, but Carol, I was going to ask, how did your experience of theater translate to novel writing? Now that you just touched on working.
So I studied the Meisner technique, and the definition of acting under the Meisner technique is the art of living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And that's what I did on a stage, and I was far too introverted to be doing that all the time, and it took me a while to figure out why I was so unhappy. And once I figured out that I wanted to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances by myself in a room with the door closed, I was much happier.
Tennessee Williams says in a streetcar, I in the last menagerie, I give you truth in I ask one question? Can I get sued? Because in that Blanche Dubois story, I have the Blanche character lose her teaching job in a place called Glenwood, Minnesota, whose team names for the school are the Rams, is the Rams. And it has a Conoco station, a Conoco refinery, not a station, a small Conoco refinery. Can I get sued for this? Because it's clearly Renshaw, but I thought it was so clever. I know, I'll call it Redwood and have the team named the Rams, just like they are in real life. Well, it's good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Now, we have Steve's next book to look forward to.